Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Political Agenda. Tonight's topic is the Arab League Observer Mission and the situation in Syria. The role and effectiveness of Arab League observers in Syria has been cast into doubt amid reports that members of the mission have not had unfettered access to rest of cities. Arab observers are touring Syria's most tense cities to ensure the government is withdrawing the army and bringing an end to widespread bloodshed. But activists are expressing great skepticism about situation on the ground because the observers represent the first international intervention in the country and the foreign press remains largely barred. The mission is a rare window into circumstances on the spot. On the other hand, a pan-Arab body, Arab Parliament, called Sunday for the immediate withdrawal of all the Arab League monitors in Syria because Syrian regime has kept up killings of government opponents even in the presence of the observers. The presence of the mission of the Arab League team has given the Syrian regime a cover to commit inhumane acts and flagrant violations. In order to discuss this topic furthermore, allow me to introduce my guests from Manama, Bahrain. I have along with me Mr. Mohammed Ismail Al-Amadi, Member of Parliament and General Coordinator of the Bahraini Association to Solidarity with the Syrian People. From Cairo, Yahya Ghanem, President of the Diplomatic Section at Al Ahram newspaper. Last but not the least, in the studio, Dr. Ibrahim النحاس, Professor of Political Science at King Saud University. All of you, welcome to the program. And before we start discussing the topic, the Arab League continued sending its observers to monitor the implementation of its initiative to end the crackdown on the anti-government protest. The UN General Assembly voted by a strong majority to condemn the Syrian authorities for the crackdown, which has left 5,000 people dead since March. On the other hand, demonstrators are calling for political freedom, an end to corruption, action on poverty, and the lifting of an emergency law. More details in this following report.
After nearly 10 months of violence in which the United Nations say more than 5,000 people have been killed, an Arab monitoring mission has spent the past week assessing Assad's compliance with the peace plan. In partially upbeat comments, Arab League Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi said Syria's military had withdrawn from residential areas and was on the outskirts of the country's cities, but gunfire continued and snipers were still a threat.
I think the basic mission of the Arab League observers in Syria, based on the decision by the Arab League ministers to advance the Arab solution, based on three scenarios or three steps. First one, to remove the army and the security forces from within the cities. Second, to free all jailed persons based on the protesting and demonstrations. And then I think to allow for free media and to allow for free demonstrations.
The Syrian government bars most international journalists from operating in the country, making it difficult to verify accounts of incidents. The Syrian President Bashar al-Assad blamed the unrest on foreign-backed armed Islamists, who officials say have killed 2,000 security personnel.
طبعا سبق ورحبنا بالمبادرة العربية.
We have already welcomed the Arab League invitation and the Arab observers as well. The observers' role is very significant and remarkable, and they should stick to the Arab League plan to release the detainees, to ease violence, and to settle the crisis in Syria.
In the meantime, the Arab League plan calls for Assad to withdraw troops and tanks from the streets, release detainees, and talk to his opponents. But many Syrian opposition activists are skeptical that the mission can put real pressure on Assad to hold the violence.
هناك جدل قائم حاليا حول المراقبين باعتقادي هذا الجدل يعكس حالة.
There is a debate over the observers sent to the Arab League to monitor the situation in Syria, which means that there are debates as well in the Arab League itself. But what is clear that the mission will be continued and so far we don't know what the observers will tackle. But what was mentioned that the political agendas are playing an important role to practice pressure on the observers. Anyway, we should wait for months to see the results.
So far, the Arab League has more than 70 observers, and it will increase that number by 30 more within days. So there will then be more than 100 observers, and that number will increase, because the Arab states, mostly without exception, contributed individuals and more are expected.
I have some doubt about the effectiveness of this mission because the Syrian regime has many ways to manipulate and turn around about the full faith implementation of the protocol. So far, it seemed to me that the observation team will fail.
Casualty figures and other information are hard to verify, as most foreign media are barred from reporting freely in Syria. Also, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is struggling to defeat a popular uprising and to avoid being toppled. For a political agenda, this is Mirihan Abdelmajid.
Welcome back. Let me start from Manama, Bahrain. Mr. Al-Amadi, you are the General Coordinator of the Bahraini Association to Solidarity with the Syrian People. First of all, let me take your elaboration on the situation right now. Just give me, before we start discussion, how do you see the situation in Syria right now?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for inviting me to your program here.
Welcome.
At the beginning, I'd like to send my all regards and respects to the whole Syrian people that are being suffering from a forced regime that carrying out massacres and genocide against them. The Syrian people these days really are facing an army that is has no mercy at all, and he is trying to kill as much as he can in order to keep his chair. I pray to God to bless all the martyrs that fall down during the past few months in order to get their freedom and democracy and rights and dignity. I call also for to protect those people from being killed by such regime, brutal regime, without mercy.
Mr. Ghanem in Cairo, what is your assessment on the situation in Syria?
Excuse me?
What's your assessment on the situation right now in Syria? How do you read it, sir?
Well, I believe that there are certain standard procedures that should have been taken before and during the mission of the monitors, of the Arab monitors, that hasn't been taken. And I would appeal for the Arab League to review its situation and to start applying those standard procedures. For instance, that's my personal view.
Yeah,
I think that the Arab monitors have been victimized by the kind of propaganda from one party or another, that they should prove during the mission that they are not biased against the Syrian regime, and that they are not part of the so-called plot against the Syrian regime. And in order to prove otherwise, they have been performing in a way that haven't been 100% neutral. That's how I see things. That this is my analysis, and I believe that in order to prevent something like that, the Arab monitors should have undergone an intensive orientation program before taking such mission. an orientation program that would teach and educate them, each one of them, that he or she shouldn't be victimized by such propaganda. Second, that in order to take such a mission and to do such a job, a very sensitive job, a monitor should detach himself emotionally and to detach himself or herself from his political inclinations, and also, on top of that, to detach himself or herself from the political inclinations of his or her country. So I believe that this is a very important part and basic part of the orientation program that the Arab monitors didn't undergo, and I think that this is a serious shortcoming in the mission of the Arab monitors. Of course, there are so many other remarks and shortcomings that should be taken into view and consideration by the Arab League if such mission should be extended in the near future.
Okay. Professor Ibrahim, also, before we start discussing in details, give me your assessment on the situation in Syria. How do you read it?
Yeah, first of all, Syria regime isn't taking this situation seriously, actually. The most important thing, Syria didn't actually sign the Arab initiative. It signed, as they call it, the protocol that attached to the initiative. And that Prince Saud al-Faisal, the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, he talked about that during the GCC meeting here in Riyadh, and he said, should Syria sign the Arab initiative instead of the protocol? And he then talked to the Syria regime to do everything possible to stop this situation. From this point, we shouldn't expect a lot from the Syria regime, since it doesn't actually agree about the Arab initiative. The footage that came from Syria, actually, in different ways, show that a Syria regime is going actually to finish the job by using its heavy weapons, actually, tanks. We saw that in streets. So since then, Arab League monitors, actually, they don't do anything more than just see and talk about it. And in general, I don't expect a lot from those monitors, actually, inside Syria, since they are 70 right now, and as in your report came, 70 in Syria, they will not do anything, actually. So the situation is pessimistic for me. Syrian people will suffer more and more. Syria regime will not stop this job. So we expect a lot of killing.
A lot of killings. Let me move on to Manama. Mr. Ahmadi, the insufficient number of the members of the Arab League mission in Syria is controversial. Comments by the head of the mission, Sudanese General Mohammed Dabi, that the initial assessment of the situation in the hot city of Homs was reassuring, added to the sense of unease. How do you read the credibility of the mission? And we've heard Mr. Ghanem, he said they are untrained or unwell trained, and also the number is less, 70 people with the adding of 30, also 100 people. Is it enough for them to monitor every single street in the Syrian hot cities?
Well, I totally agree with Mr. Ghanem's point of view about training those observers before going to Syria in the case of manipulating them and turn around them. But at the other hand, I'm seeing the job of those observers are really useless with a regime, in such a violent regime that is trying to finish the whole story by killing people. What do you think about a commission that is combined by the police forces of the Syrian regime? There are areas in Syria now which are freed from being entered by the police forces, but with the commission observers now, the police forces are entering these areas freely as combining the observers. What do you think? Yes, yes. What do you think about the people who are meeting those observers in Syria? Do you think they are feeling comfort to talk to them with the police force beside them? This is really, I can say, it's the big silly mistake has been taken by the Arab League to send such a team to the Syrian to Syria really.
Mr. Ghanem, the head of the Arab Parliament, Ali Salim al-Dikbasi, said the president of the Arab League monitors has raised the fury of the Arab people who request impartials. Your comment on the impartial committees?
No, excuse me, there's something wrong in the voice. Could you please repeat the last
Yes.
part of the question?
The head of the Arab Parliament, Mr. Dikbasi, said the presence of the Arab League monitors has raised the fury of the Arab people who request impartial committees. Do you think impartial committees will help?
Impartial committee to do what? To monitor the events in Syria?
Yes, rather than the monitors right now.
Well,
he's asking for the withdrawing
supposedly,
of those. Please.
Supposedly, the commission, the Arab Monitor Commission in Syria is supposed to be impartial. But then again, I mean, let me give you some comments on my personal comments on the selection and the establishment of the commission itself. I believe in the importance, the ultimate importance of establishing such mechanism within the Arab League, the monitoring teams in such situations. But in the meantime, I would have hoped for the selectivity of the members of such team to be more thorough. With all due respect, the head of the Arab Monitors team, the choice of the head of the team was not 100% right. In my estimation, and I do hold high respect for the gentleman, he had some question marks about sort of an involvement, personal involvement, negative one. I'm not saying that this is 100% true, but that's what has been reported. Negative involvement in Darfur, and we all know the kind of violation that were committed in Darfur. So in my choice, if I have the decision, I wouldn't go for such choice. I mean, some person who's got some exclamation marks in front of his name and some question marks.
You're referring
about his involvement
to General
in Darfur.
Dabi, sir?
That is just an example. Also,
you're referring to General Dabi?
The kind of high profile media-wise.
You didn't hear me, do you?
Of high profile media-wise that the team has maintained, relatively speaking, during its mission. I would, in such a situation, there's no need for such high profile media-wise for such teams. Also, it seemed to me that at certain points, the picture was not 100% clear in front of the Arab monitors, in meaning that in some cases I was mixed up as they were, as assumingly they were, some of the Arab monitors, that they were mixed up whether it was a mission to mediate between the conflicting parties in Syria, or just monitoring and reporting on what's happening on Syria. I guess that all these remarks should be reviewed thoroughly and seriously by the Arab League before taking the decision of extending that mission or not. Because if those points, those remarks were not reviewed thoroughly and seriously and corrected, I don't believe that extending such mission would be of any importance. Let's look for some other mechanism to deal with the situation in Syria.
To add to what Mr. Ghanem just said, also, reports indicate that, Professor Ibrahim, reports indicate that presence of the Arab League mission gives also the Syrian regime a cover to commit inhumane acts. You know, what has been discussed by both my guests in Manama and Cairo are true. Are they mediating? Are they monitoring? Do they have to report to the Arab League? And we have seen Mr. Al-Arabi last night reporting that the withdrawal of heavy machinery or heavy weapons from the streets, but the snipers are still there and the killings are continued. First of all, tell me about their mission. Should it be as a mediation? Is it a mediation? Is it monitoring? Is it to take force? Is it to take action? What is the role in your point of view, and what should they do?
Yeah, from the last, I will say it's covering.
It's covering the actions.
It's covering the, because since the beginning, actually, the Arab initiative shouldn't take this place. But since the Arab League, hijacked by some Arab regimes like Algeria, Sudan, Iraq, the government of Lebanon, those actually imposed what they want toward the Syrian issues right now. If we remember about the Libyan issues, it's a big different from the Syrian issues. For that, the GCC actually took the place first, and they talked about the Syria government to stop this issue and look for those people, for its people actually. The Arab monitors actually, since the first time the chief of this group,
General Al-Dabi.
Yes, he said that everything is going well inside.
Well, but we've heard Mr. Ghanem. He said he has, names. He's been participating in Darfur, and
yes, and that.
So we should choose the right people. We're not against General Al-Dabi because he's trying to help, but if he's inexperienced, if they can be manipulated, as been said also by my guest, that they could be manipulated, they could be taken to some areas that they do not suffer. So are they free to move?
I don't think so. As our brother Yahya said, the first strong point they took it, they signed General Dabi as a head of this group, and we know his reputation actually toward the world isn't good. Then the Syrian regime will not allow them to do what they want actually, and they will impose them some conditions where they move, and maybe they will use some power against them to show them this, not the government but the other side. For that I say the Arab League hijacked by some government, they imposed General Dabi actually to shift this group. I'm not looking for this group in a positive way, and let's say this group say the issue there is very negative, and they report that to the Arab League. What the Arab League will do then? I don't think we will.
We'll take that in a minute, but their role. So you're not thinking that they are doing a positive actions now for the Syrian people?
No, I don't think so. And
they're actually doing a favor for the regime.
Absolutely, that's what I'm thinking about.
My guest from Manama, Mr. Ahmadi, also have the Arab League mission efforts succeeded to stop the killings of children, women, and also ensure the withdrawal of troops from the Syrian streets and cities, release thousands of detainees, or start dialogue with the opposition? We haven't seen any of such.
Well, really, the commission has failed before it starts, because until now, we see at least 160 people have been killed since the commission has entered Syria.
Yes.
I would like to add to your colleagues in the studio that the head of the commission is also a member of the Ba'ath party in Sudan, and he was activist in the Ba'ath party. Also, the members of the committee or the commission are unknowns. What are their profile before? In summary, the killing in Syria has not stopped. the military troops are being in the streets. I've heard a lot of stories about manipulating the observers by taking them to other cities than they intended to go, by changing the signs of the road and changing the signs of the cities, which we cannot really think of or dream of. Many are talking about taking the prisoners out of the prisons during the visit of the observers to the prisons. Many other manipulating efforts have been exercised by the regime in Syria to rule out the role of the commission in Syria.
Mr. Ghanem, you have raised a good point. You said the monitors are untrained. In your point of view, as a diplomatic person, you have the experience. In what way should be the trained? And secondly, in what way, on what basis should we choose monitoring team if we are to?
Okay. Let me start by, I will answer your question definitely, but let me raise another point before answering your question. I don't want to be misunderstood. The establishment of such commission, which is the first of its kind in the Arab world.
Yes, you're right.
I think we should encourage such kind of mechanism, and also try within the Arab leagues to establish permanent mechanisms to deal with such situations, because it seems to me that in the coming future we're going to be suffering and we're going to be witnessing more, unfortunately, more of these situations in such time of change. So as a matter of principle, I would encourage the Arab League to be encouraged to establish such commissions on permanent basis. That is as far as the principle is concerned. As for the form of the, because there are two parts of this issue, the form and the content. The form, which has to do with the selection of the monitors, something that I've just talked about before. There should be a more thorough selection criteria for the monitors in order to achieve diversity of within those monitoring groups. As far as the countries, the Arab countries are concerned, more monitors representing as many Arab countries are concerned, not just concentrating on the countries whose regimes are being allied with a certain regime or not. Also from different walks of life, not necessarily military field or political. It should come from the media, from political life, from military, from different walks of life. This is as far as the selection criteria are concerned, which has to do with the form. As for the content, I talked before about certain standard procedure that should be taken in order to ensure that we should get as the most right facts out of the situation that we're having here. To answer your question about how monitors should be trained, I believe that there are some training courses, of course, for monitors in such situations. And I've talked about examples. I've given some examples on how such intensive orientation program should be done. As far as training the monitors on how to detach themselves emotionally from their personal inclination, political or religious, how they should detach themselves from their countries and their governments' inclinations and attachments, political attachments. There are so many, and also on how to cross-examine information and facts collected from the scenes of the events in the country which is being subjected to that monitoring. There are many things that should be educated, that the monitors should be educated before just throwing them into a situation like that. I feel sympathy. I'm actually more sympathetic with most of the monitors in Syria because they haven't received such orientation program. I personally have undergone such program before because I've taken part in some observing and monitoring missions before, either in monitoring the human rights violation or monitoring some elections in different countries. So I would appeal to the Arab League to give more attention to that part of monitoring before just throwing in any monitors in any country.
Okay, Mr. Ghanem, I'll come back to you.
That would be actually not right, not for the Syrian cause, and not also for the reputation of the monitors themselves.
Okay, I'll come back to you, but give you a short pause and we'll continue discussing the situation in Syria and the Arab observers. Welcome back, but allow me, dear guests in Manama and the studio, I want to go back to Mr. Ghanem. Mr. Ghanem, you said you've taken some courses on the training, on the observing missions. Could you just give us just a few details? What should be trained, or the monitors, what should be trained, or what courses they have to go in order to monitor honestly, because all of you are trying to say they have to be honest regardless of their religion and their country. But just give us the point of views that you've studied or any monitor could study in order to be an honest mediator or an honest monitor. Mr. Ghanem.
Okay, let me give you that. And this training, I've taken this training in the OSCE, which is it's a very well known organization. For instance, when a monitor starts collecting facts from the scene, there are certain techniques. I mean, of course, there's no enough time. There's no such, enough time to explain such techniques and educate the public about them. There are certain techniques that should be educated to the monitors in order to cross-examine such facts and to distinguish between the misinformation and disinformation. Of course, let me define the disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation, it is the kind which is being performed unwittingly, and unintentionally. Disinformation is being performed intentionally and wittingly from the perpetrator. So there are certain techniques that we learn to distinguish between disinformation, misinformation, and the pure facts. There are certain techniques to cross-examine also the facts, to distinguish between gossips and facts. Also, there are some other techniques which are being used to distinguish between the choreographed things and the real things. Like fake interviews to be manipulated by fake interviewees. There are certain techniques that they should be educated before going into the country, before going into any country, to distinguish between a choreographed interviewee and a real interviewee.
Okay, Professor Ibrahim, many good points by Mr. Ghanem in Egypt, but also let's talk about the future. Now we have heard it all from the past, but Arab Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi said that he needs, or a week is needed to ensure that Al-Assad would fulfill his promises. Shall we see more pressure to be mounted soon on Al-Assad's government by the Arab League? Now speaking future.
Yeah, let's just, I will...
comment
just,
on that.
just one comment about that, this group, the monitors and the training of them. First, the most important thing, who will choose those, or this such group, if we agree about this group? Absolutely the governments, Arab governments. Does the public opinion, the Arab public opinion, accept such a group, since those governments are not democracies? This is the most important point. So the Arab public opinion will not accept such group, no matter what they say about the situation in Syria or any other else.
What should we do then?
This is the most important thing here, this big question. For me, I don't have answer for it, since we as a public opinion, we don't accept the Arab League as an organization. Actually, this organization is very weak. It needs to be recorrected or rebuild again and again, actually, and we need to change many things in such a group. And then if we train or not train, actually, if this group doesn't have the right to move and do anything they want inside the country, so we'll not have any reality from the inside. Any country has such a problem. For me, this group or any other group will not give us good report.
Okay, my question.
It's about the future.
No, I mean Arab League Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi said a week is needed for Al-Assad to fulfill all his promises.
This will not happen, actually, and we right now finished two weeks.
So we are being manipulated by also the Nabil Al-Arabi?
Yeah, Syrian regime doesn't see any problem. So they say this group is such a terrorist group, and those doesn't follow the government law. Since we have this such talking about from the Syrian regime, so we don't expect to solve this situation from the Syria. Secretary General Al-Arabi, when he talked about this, he just with all respect to him, he is just secretary. The everything is doing in the Arab League from the ministry meeting.
The ministerial meeting of the foreign ministers, yes.
Yes, so just he talk about this, and we will stay in the same situation. We will hear more killing inside Syria, and the Arab League just will hear from them, just talking and talking and talking. If they want to do something, they should do it before, and we don't need actually a group to go inside Syria. All photos that we have from inside Syria, all things that we hear from there, that give us good sign there's a big problem inside Syria, and that since then we should move to the Security Council or something to do something and stop the killing. No matter the Syrian regime talking about, we see the reality from there.
Let me go to Manama with Mr. Muhammad Al-Amadi. Mr. Muhammad, if I wanted to ask you the question, which is the same question to Professor, your point of view of what Mr. Al-Arabi said, and also Rima Fleihan, the member of the opposition Syrian National Council, she said that all the Arab League monitors' mission could not stop the brutal acts of the Syrian regime. What are the solutions for this dilemma, in your point of view?
Thank you. I really stand beside the Mr. Ad-Dighbasi's statement about withdrawing the observers from Syria. Instead, I suggest that pressures should be exercised over the Al-Assad's regime to allow for international press and media to enter Syria to cover the whole situation there freely. This will be covering the observing mission in Syria, and it will not give coverage to the Syrian regime to kill more. For the solution to the Syrian situation, I think it should be split to two parts: the political parts and the humanitarian parts. I've been to the Syrian-Turkish border, where I've met the refugees there in the camps. The stories coming from inside Syria are miserable. Lot of stories telling about unbelievable stories about what is happening in Syria in terms of killing or in terms of how people are living now. So I think the first thing is to give the United Nations now the authority to impose a safe zone for the Syrian people so they can protect themselves and can live safely in a zone that's being protected by international troops. The second thing, I urge the whole world, the free world, the governments and the people of the whole world to start helping the Syrian people. They are really in need now. We need a lot of campaigns to start raising money and start sending help to the Syrian people inside and outside Syria.
Okay. And Mr. Ghanem, also, so do we have a failure here? Do you think that the opposition tries to create a solidified front to enhance its credibility? Meanwhile, some countries express their fear about the post-Assad period if al-Assad will be forced to abandon his power. What are the Arab League's plans to deal with the situation?
Do you mean what are the plans of the Arab League to deal with the situation after
post-Assad era?
After Assad being ousted?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes. My question was, you're right. You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe that, well, we've jumped over the conclusions, of course. I mean,
Okay.
we assume that, that Assad is out. But let me go along with this assumption. I believe that during the course of routing out Assad and his regime, we are unfortunately risking the battlement of the Syrian state itself. Unfortunately, because the regime in Syria is a regime based on the minority of the minorities, they have been working for decades to intertwine and interweave the roots of the regime along the battlements of the state itself. So in order to rout out the regime, there might be a risk of shaking the battlement, the very battlement of the Syrian state. So I would hope that if the Arab states and the international community opted for what is called the responsibility to protect, which is a principle was endorsed by the United Nations and the General Assembly in 2004, which obliged the international community to intervene in many ways, in many forms, to protect the civilians, unarmed civilians, against the brutal or the brutality of their regimes. I would appeal for the international community and more specifically for the Arab states to mind this side effect of not shaking the battlement of the Syrian state while routing out the Syrian regime. This is actually the most thing that I fear during this course. But let me also state some other thing, that we have an obligation towards ourselves as Arabs, and being obliged to ourselves, we are obliged in a different way to the only option, the only mechanism that we have here, which is the Arab League. I know it is weak, but it's us who weakened that Arab League. This is the only option we've got. This is the only mechanism. We have to invigorate that mechanism, and we have to train us and to remodify the Arab League. And in doing so, if we opted to go to the Security Council, I would hope that the Arab League wouldn't just throw the whole case to the Security Council. Let the Arab League go side by side with the Security Council during the whole mission, in order for such mission to be educational for us and for the Arab League for a better future. Let's try to re-establish the Arab League as a warning, to the tyrants of tomorrow, not to be born today.
Well, Mr. Ghanem brought it. Now, the Arab League shows that it's not a strong organization. It is, and some of the Arab countries, as you said yourself and my guess, that it is, are we going to the international community as we had in Libya, or should we go side by side with the Security Council, or we are still behind? We don't have the executive powers to enforce our regulations against Syria.
Yeah.
As you said a while ago, even if the regime refused, what can the Arab League does?
Yeah.
So it cannot, as an organization, do anything of the countries themselves. What should be done, first of all, to fix the regulations of the Arab League before we enter to other countries? And then if we leave it to the international community, then we have no say as Arabs, as we did in Libya. The NATO had all the say.
Yeah.
They did what they wanted. They demolished the country. They've even killed or helped in killing the president of
Libya.
Do you think the international community should the Arab League go for the international community, ask them for help, that we cannot do anything?
Yes, Mr. Ghanem said the Arab League is weak. I say it's dead.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's even stronger. Okay.
Yeah, that's because nobody would expect 10 months of killing inside Syria, and the Arab League is watching.
It's given more intrusives and truce, and every time they're giving them more time.
Yes, because that's shameful for us actually toward the world. When the West or the East, they look to us and look to this meeting in the Arab League, and they say, they giving the Syrian regime more time to kill its people. In the same time, the government of France or Britain or the Western country, they talked about it and they want to interfere actually. But the Arab League say, just give us some time, and then Russia, took some step.
Side with Russia, with Syria.
Side, and it's went to the Security Council actually with initiative. The world is working, and we just watching. This is the big difference actually. So the Arab League must, if they want to really to be active in the future, must take a place and talk about it, and since talk about it loudly, since we have a new government in Egypt, a new government in Tunisia, a new government in Libya, and those governments are revolutionary. It should be revolutionary, and they with the GCC a collective action toward this issue, they must do something and go really to internationalize this situation, to stop the killing inside Syria and protect the people. If we wouldn't do that, I believe the Western country, leading by the United States, after while unfortunately there is an election inside the United States in this year, leading then by UK or France, and they will maybe using the NATO without Arab Arab League intervention, and that is disaster for us actually, because they will lead Syria to their situation and internationalize the issue there, and putting in the future their government. So we must do something actually, because the situation in Syria will make us suffer in the future if we don't do anything right now to stop it. I'm talking about the Arab governments actually. So the situation is really need us to work and just not to just watch.
Just to monitor.
Yes.
Just to monitor. Mr. Al-Amadi in Manama, if the Syrian regime can stand the crisis, then how long the opposition will be able to stand up for their demands? You've said that you have visited the borders, you have heard the stories from either side. Do you think they'll be able to stand up for their demands?
Yeah, you will not believe me if I told you that I've met the young people and old people from Syrian refugees at the camps and outside Syria also as well. All of them have the same idea. All of them have the same spirit of that they have standed and they will not get back. One of the old men who also faced the massacres of the 80s by the Hafez al-Assad's regime that time, and he is now facing the same with his son Bashar. He said, we have broken the fear inside us, and we have stood up on our feet, and we believe that if we sit down or get back, we will be killed. The only way on for us is to move forward. And this is the spirit which I found in all Syrian people. And I think they will continue until they will win, and they will win hopefully near future.
Mr. Ghanem, so as Mr. Hamadi has just mentioned, that the Syrian people will stay and asking for the demands. Do you think that they are able, without the help of the Arab League, well, not in Libya, in Tunisia and Egypt they had different situation, in Libya they had different, but in Syria, which side do you think at the end will win, in your point of view?
Well, in the long run, of course, the, people tend to win because I always believe that it's more possible for the people's struggle to win than the possibility and the probability of the tyrant regimes winning against the natural movements of history. So it's more possible for the peoples to win in the long term. But in the course of the struggle, there will be more bloodshed, and that's what we are trying to minimize, at least to minimize in order to eventually stop such blood spill. I believe that we shouldn't leave the Syrian people by itself, struggling by itself. We should mobilize, trying to support the people, and even if such support to the people would mean trying to intervene, even to mediate, even to make some sort of settlement with the Syrian regime, with a sort of a tacit agreement for the Syrian regime to withdraw or to provide a safe exit. I would say that personally I wouldn't discard such possibility in order to spare more bloodshed. As I said, we have to work in that direction, and also because we learn by mistakes. So I am very much supportive to to give a chance to the Arab League and to us to learn from our mistakes and by our mistakes in order to reinvigorate the Arab League. This is our only hope to face the challenges in the future. We shouldn't drop out the Arab League like that. It is our responsibility to reinvigorate it, and in order to make so, if we go to the Security Council, the Arab League should go side by side with the Security Council. We shouldn't throw the whole thing on the shoulders of the Security Council and the West.
Professor Ibrahim here do not agree with you, Mr. Ghanem.
Yeah, but because it's good to be optimistic, but you have to have something to be optimistic about. But till what time or for how long we will be optimistic? The Arab League is, maybe more than 60 years old. 60 years old, that's enough to learn a lot of lessons and to rebuild yourself and to be very active. And back to your question before, if the monitors, they say a negative report about the Syrian situation, what they can do, the Arab League, if they say, the Syrian regime is
as tyrant, is killing people.
Yes. Then what the Arab League will say? They don't have actually
executive powers. They don't have army or military to take action.
I believe they will say you must stop your killing your people. That's the most thing they can say. The situation. It's clear for us actually, and we don't need to say a lot about it. About how much this regime is really doing bad thing for its people.
Let me go to the final question to all three guests, which is how can the Syrian crisis be brought to an end? And let me begin with Manama, with Mr. Ahmadi. Mr. Ahmadi, how can the Syrian crisis be brought to an end in your point of view?
Well, the crisis is because of people who are demanding freedom, dignity, and respect, and their rights, and a regime that is refusing to give so, and trying to end that with power and forces. So the only solution for the Syrian problem now is the step down of the Syrian regime, either peacefully or by force.
So the stepping down,
interfering
the stepping down of the regime. Is that the solution,
yes,
sir?
stepping down of the regime. But I think interfering other nations like the Security Council is a must in the coming days.
Dr. Mohammed,
but
okay, we've got the clear. Let me go to Mr. Ghanem. Mr. Ghanem, I have 30 seconds for you. Give me the solution in your point of view.
First of all, I'm not optimistic when it comes to the Syria situation. I'm just being realist. I'm trying to be a realist. And to answer your question, what can we do if the report of the monitors came out negative? There are many things that could be done if there is a political will. There could be a freeze, a total freeze to the relations between the Arab countries and the Syrian regime, economic sanctions, serious economic sanctions. Also, the immediate neighboring states can legally establish their right to establish a safe havens to the Syrian unarmed civilians. There are many things that could be built upon such negative report.
Okay, sir.
As for the way out of this crisis, I guess.
Yeah, in one sentence, please.
I guess the more seriousness from the side of the Arab countries. I guess also that the Syrian regime should receive a serious message that if such report came out negative, we will go to the Security Council, and there would be no mercy when we go to the Security Council.
So Security Council, Dr. Ibrahim, in one. Thank you, Ghan. 1 minute.
Without international intervention?
No, what is the solution in your point of view in one sentence, sir? International intervention.
Yes.
That's it. Well, dear viewers, thank all my guests. From Cairo was with me Mr. Yahya Ghanem, President of the Diplomatic Section of Al-Ahram newspaper. From Al-Manama was my guest from Hamad Ismail Al-Amadi, Member of Parliament and General Coordinator of the Bahraini Association to Solidarity with the Syrian People. Also from the studio, Professor of Political Science in King Saud University, Dr. Ibrahim Nahas. I want to thank you all. You have added value to the program. On behalf of Director Hiyam Al-Kilani, Assistant Director Badr Al-Anizi, and the preparation team, Muhammad Al-Husainan, Muhammad Al-Ghamdi, and Khadija Al-Shehri, I wish you a good night. Wassalamu alaikum.